afternoon and welcome to this podcast. My name is Russell Speirs. I'm the founder and chairman of RS Academics, and it's my pleasure to host this conversation. And during this podcast series, I'm meeting up with friends that I've made over my 25 years of working in education, asking them all what they think helps a school to thrive. And today, I'm really delighted to meet up with someone called Libby Nicholas, who I think we first met about 15 years ago. Is that right, Libby? We think?
Yeah, about 15 years ago, long time.
Yeah, great. Well, look, it's really nice to see you again, and thank you very much for giving up time for this conversation. I was listening back to some of the previous episodes in this series, and I noticed that sort of just by accident, really, I asked each of them what they were up to at the moment, but I think I heard you say the other day you shouldn't do anything in November. Is that right?
That's true. November
So
is a month of misery. So try not to ask too much of people in November. December, it's fine when everyone's joyful and pre-Christmassy. But yeah, November, not so much.
okay,
But I don't
okay.
mind.
Well, that's well, that's good advice, I'm sure. So Libby, you work at Duke's Education. You're the managing director at Duke's Education. So could you just tell me and those who are listening to this a bit about Duke's and a bit about your role, please?
Yeah, of course, happy to. Duke's Education is a family of nurseries, schools and colleges, over 70 settings, both in the UK and internationally now. And we are a very kind of growing organisation over the last 5 years or so. I joined in January 2020 as managing director, and my role really is twofold. Operationally, I line manage the heads and principals of all of our nurseries across Duke's, and many of our schools, both prep, senior and all through across London. And then strategically, I sit on the board alongside Atif Hassan, our chairman and founder, and our other MDs to strategically lead the organisation and the business.
Okay, great. So, and most of your schools up until now are in London, is that right? I think of Duke's as being mainly in London. Maybe I'm wrong there. Is that
Mainly southeast, although we do actually go all the way down to Worthing on the south coast, and
okay?
also Cambridge, and of course as far west as Cardiff, with Cardiff Sixth Form College.
Of course.
So predominantly the most are across London and the southeast.
Okay. So you've been there since 2020. Now, you and I first met. We think we first met when you were at the Girls' Day School Trust. In fact, we're pretty sure that that's where we met. So just could you just remind me and tell others a little bit about what you've done and where and how you came to be the managing director at Duke? Because I think quite a lot of your experience has been in the school groups and academy trusts and things. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, in both the state and the private sectors.
Yeah.
So I've kind of jumped from one to the other quite regularly across my career. Yes, I started out as an English teacher, senior English teacher trained, and that was in a state school in Croydon, South London. And I then joined the GDST into the senior leadership team of schools in the GDST. Really loved it, loved being a senior leader, loved being in the private sector and learning all about that. And I then worked in central services as Deputy Director of Education underneath Kevin Stannard, who was Innovation and Learning. And across the GDSD, I really that was my first experience of working in a family of schools and seeing how working within a family of schools can really accelerate improvements and innovation and thinking. So that was fabulous. Really loved my time at GDST. I'm a GDST girl myself, as are my sisters. So it's kind of in me. So I love that. And then I went back to the state sector. I was asked by the DfE to go into the academies sector, and was asked to found a new multi-academy trust focusing on schools in the north of England, which were either in special measures or being rebrokered from MATs, which had not survived, should we say. So I founded Australia Academy Trust as CEO, and grew that to 28 schools, primary and secondary, most of them in measures when we started. Led that organisation for 5 years. As CEO, managed to get all of the schools out of special measures. Lots of travelling.
Yeah.
Thank you. Lots of travelling across the UK and really quite crunchy, tough work, working with communities which were very disenfranchised and who had kind of lost hope and optimism about their children's education future. Absolutely loved that role. Sometime prior, I'd met Atif Hassan, our founder, and was really struck by him, both on an individual level personally, but also inspired by his vision for this new group of schools, Dukes. So he and I stayed in close contact, and I was delighted to join Dukes in January 2020. Got my feet under the desk and obviously went straight into lockdown. So it was an interesting start.
Yes, of course. Yeah,
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 so
that's
that's
right.
a bit of my background really. But fundamentally, I'm an educator. Education and looking after other people's children, which I think is the greatest privilege one can be given, is really what drives me every day to do things better, to do them the best to our ability, and to continually strive to improve and keep optimism within the sector.
Yes, well, we need it, certainly. So
We do.
let's get to the topic of the day, the topic of this conversation. And as you know, I've been asking other people, other educators and leaders that I find particularly inspiring and interesting, to say what they think helps to make a school thrive. So what is your contribution to that conversation? What do you think helps to make a school thrive, Libby?
Yeah, so I gave this question lots of thought as soon as you were in touch with me. And if I may, I think I'm going to focus on leadership, but quite specifically leading with heart, which happens to be one of our Duke's values, but that's not actually why I chose it, because happily the Duke's values align very closely with my own.
Yeah,
So
sure.
leading with heart, which other people may call compassionate leadership or leadership with kind of high emotional intelligence. So I'm going to focus on that a bit. And the reason really is because education in and of itself is really about the art of emotion. There's a fantastic book called The Managed Heart, which really focuses in on this, about how teachers within the classroom and outside of the classroom are constantly having to not only check their own emotional responses, manage their own emotions, sometimes method act their emotions when it comes to dealing with children or parents when they themselves are feeling dimmed in enthusiasm or indeed cynical about what's possible. And so this constant act of emotional artistry, I suppose, makes education as a sector quite unique. I think the phrase within the book is called the transmutation of emotion, how having to not only manage one's own emotions, but also to inspire, to feel love for a child who is not your own child, to feel love for your subject, impart enthusiasm, inspiration. All of these are very emotional, kind of take an emotional toll on yourself.
Yeah, yeah.
So as a leader in that space, I think it's really important to recognize that there is an emotional psychological contract going on all the time with teachers and educators. Therefore, the framework of leadership, in my view, has to have emotion and the sensitivity to emotion at its heart. And really what I mean by leading with heart is really leading in a way where you are attuned to the emotional needs, sensitivities, aspirations of your colleagues around you, but also where you are making decisions, both within the classroom, within the boardroom, which really focus in on the well-being, not only of the children in your care, although that's obviously fundamental, but also the adults and colleagues who you work with as well. So that would be what I would choose.
Yeah. No, it's something that resonates with me. I don't know if I told you this the other day or not, but I was instrumental in the founding of a company we specialized in emotional intelligence coaching and training, and that was back in the, I think when that was probably about 2001, something like that. So yeah, there's always been a subject very close to my heart. When you take over a school, because Dukes is growing fast,
Yeah.
and I'm sure there's all kinds of due diligence goes into that before you acquire a school and before it joins the family of schools in Dukes. But you're bound to come across, or rather, you're bound to acquire schools that maybe where the leadership is less, let's say, less emotionally intelligent. Let's just put it like that, where the EQ is a little bit lower, and where there's not that same recognition of what you're talking about. Maybe they're a bit. They don't like to make themselves a bit so vulnerable. They don't like to talk about these things. I'm not really explaining it very well, but how do you manage that when you take over a school? Maybe they don't have this similar kind of leadership culture.
It's a really good question. I mean, I think fundamentally schools are very unique places. They have a history, a rhythm, a life, and a personality, all of which are unique. And actually, very often that culture of a school is not down to the current head teacher. It can be almost inherited over time. But it's a very precious thing. And leaders who go into a school and make changes without recognizing and trying to really listen to the heartbeat of that culture of a school, I think, that can sometimes be a mistake. So within Dukes, we don't want our schools to be the same. We are very much focused on autonomy and individuality of each of the schools. Having said that, the culture of Dukes does have golden threads through it, which we do think kind of permeate through into our schools, sometimes over time, and other times, as you say, we may well have a school which just fits completely closely with our values. Indeed, many of our international acquisitions are very, very aligned with this culture of family and emotional intelligence. Where there might be a disparity between the school's culture and our own culture, or how we would hope to see things being led within our schools, then we really take a kind of multifaceted approach to it. The first thing we do is, obviously, we've got all our due diligence and things, but we really get to know the schools. We spend a lot of time in schools. I'm in schools, 4 days a week, or nurseries 4 days a week, and really get to know the teachers, get to know the children, and really try and listen as to why this culture might be there. And then, of course, the new heads who join our schools, and indeed other senior leaders, are invited onto the Dukes Senior Leadership Programme, which is a really unique, quite fascinating programme of development. It's actually for not only educators and leaders within our schools, nurseries and colleges, but also within our businesses as well, because we also have consultancy businesses, activity camps underneath our Dukes Plus businesses. So it's not really an educational leadership programme. It's very much about self-leadership, about starting with yourself. And that to us is really crucial, because insecure leaders who aren't aware of their insecurities, who aren't aware of the shadows that they may bring with themselves to leadership, can make them vulnerable. And I don't mean vulnerable, as an individual, I know what you mean. In the leadership. So this exactly. So this program really, really kind of gets to a point of honesty and truth about who we are, any unconscious biases that we may have inherited, any fears that we have in leadership in our positions. And there's an executive coach who works alongside each of those participants to really help that reflective process. And I think that program, probably more than anything we do, really aligns leaders in our schools with the culture
definitely.
of Dukes, which is one of togetherness, collaboration, but a complete adherence to honesty. Good leadership and governance is really shining the torch in the darkest corners, really lighting up areas where we think we can do better. That's what great leaders should do. And that includes ourselves. So I think we can help accelerate a cultural shift towards leading with heart through lots of training and development, lots of investment in our individual leaders, but also, of course, through modelling. Lots of our school leaders go and visit other Duke settings. We'll have lots of stories being told to them about other schools' experiences of Dukes. We have a lot of moments of joy in Dukes. So every year we have either our Christmas party, where every single colleague within Dukes, everybody, caretakers, dinner ladies, teachers, leaders, everybody are invited to a big, big party at Christmas time. And then the other year we have our Dukes conference, which is last year was at Wembley, and we had lots of great speakers. So we have these moments where the whole Dukes family come together to celebrate. And I think also, Atif Hassan and the board, we ourselves really show meaningful examples of leading with heart from a board level perspective, which is really about leading people with heart, with the understanding that if they join us as an ECT, they could be with us their entire professional career, and we're going to go through death and grief and joy and birth and marriages and divorce and depression and sickness and illness, all these really important human moments we will go through together. And so we have to acknowledge that and make sure that at those crunch moments, when people are going through any of those times, that they are cradled by the organisation. And that was made very clear to me in my first year in Dukes, when my 9-month-old baby was rushed into emergency critical care. And, obviously, a hugely difficult time. We were in there for 3 weeks. And I was overwhelmed by the support and love that I received. Being so new to the organisation, there was one lady in one of the schools who was a a professional colleague. So she was working in the kitchens, and I'd met her a couple of times, and she wrote me a poem every day and sent it to my home address. And it's things like that. And I remember in that moment myself as a human really feeling like I was being carried through it by this togetherness and this love that my colleagues were showing. And I think that's really what I mean by leading with heart is, yes, there's educational leadership. Yes, there's theories of leadership. Yes, there's, leadership for change, situational leadership needs, etc., of course. But fundamentally at the heart of it, we are in an emotional sphere. And so an honouring of that is a real opportunity, because over time, what leaders, in my view, should be seeking is, what is it to have a good life? And to enable that to become fruition for our colleagues. Sure. Because this kind of dichotomy between life and work being oppositional to each other, work-life balance, or I can't have a life because I'm working, that I think is old way of thinking. Sure. We've got to make life work and merge them so that there isn't these tensions.
Well, that's kind of what a vocation is, I suppose.
Exactly.
You're familiar, I know, with the research that we've just produced called The New Art of Headship. You came to the launch, I think, didn't you? Yes, you did. And that's one of the key points that we make, which is that perhaps one of the biggest challenges and one of the most required skills is to do with managing one's own resilience and well-being as a school leader. Yeah. And in the final stages of that report, when we're talking about the development of leaders, I suppose the main point we're making is that there needs to be much, much more emphasis on that. And it certainly sounds like Duke's is a place that gets that right. So Libby, look, thank you so much. I really would love to spend longer listening to you talking about not just about Duke's, but about leading from the heart. It's definitely something that I really congratulate you for, most sincerely. I think it's wonderful. So thank you very much indeed. And I'm sure you'll have more people applying to join Duke's as a consequence of this podcast.
Thank you very much.
For your time. Thank you.
Thank you.